We go to the Rastafari village. The lineage is 500 years of slavery. When I offer them money to hold space for us, it's going to the Jamaicans that are living off the land. It's not going to a different country who owns the hotel, and then I'm not hiring people from all over to come in. It's like it's going to the people it should be going to. They tend to the land, they steward the land, they grow the mushrooms. I feel complete there. Also, just the history of their liberation. They know oppression, right? In Jamaica, not all Rastafari are seen as equal. If we're going to liberate the body, who best to be with than people who really, truly understand liberation and one love? So
All right, everybody, another episode of the Smarter Not Harder podcast. And today we're going to have so much fun talking to the only person who can make me name jealous, Coltrane Lord. Coltrane, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Boomer. It's great to be here.
So today we're going to dive into many different topics: women's health, psychedelics, trauma, a whole bunch of other things. Want to set the stage for everybody because I'm assuming that you really wanted to get involved in this space of psychedelic healing or healing in general. Take us through sort of that journey. When was that bifurcation point for you that you said like, hey, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, thank you. And I want to say thank you to your audience because those are super heavy topics. And I'm going to try as I can to make it at least engaging so that people aren't afraid to listen deeply and with an open heart and an open mind. So thank you all for being here. So how did I get to psychedelic medicine and healing? I'm going to go from most recent to I'm going to go backwards, I think.
This is a fun way to tell a story.
Yeah, it is. I've had a lot of experiences in my life that would traumatize any person, and I just happen to have a lot of them. I'm living and I'm alive and I'm abundant and I am really joyful in my body, feel amazing. And so I just want to say that as I share this story, and I hope that I don't traumatize any of you that are listening. My most recent experience with trauma is a divorce, which was not as much trauma except for the fact that my son at one point had suicide ideation. And this is after my psychedelic medicine journey and a lot of healing. And I will say that those two experiences without those tools and without that embodied healing and felt sense of wholeness would have destroyed me as a mom. All the parents out there probably understand that. And one of the biggest stressors in life is actually divorce. So before that, and what got me into plant medicine is I experienced a betrayal in my relationship, and it really, really rocks me. And I didn't understand why it rocked me so much, like to the extent that it did, because my father had betrayed our family. I remembered, I'm not going to have this happen to me. I'm leaving the person who does that to me. And all of a sudden, I'm faced with this experience, and I have two little kids. I'm shook to my core. I went through all this therapy, talk therapy, and because it's infidelity and that's sexual, and I was told that it was my fault that I was shut down. So, I like working on myself. And so I went down this rabbit hole of trying to fix myself in all ways, shapes, or forms, sexually, emotionally, intellectually, psychologically. And nothing seemed to get really to the core of what was wrong. A friend of mine who has even more trauma than I do could recognize my brokenness at the time. And so she said to me, I think you need to go see this person. I didn't care what it was by that point. I was so tired of myself that I thought, I don't care what this is, I'm going to go do it. And it was my first experience in the underground of my MDMA journey. MDMA for some people on the street is called ecstasy or Molly. It has been used in the 80s for couples therapy. For those of you who don't know what it does, it's an empathogen and it takes the serotonin in your gut and it brings it up to the brain and it allows you to see some of your trauma from a very different vantage point, from the untraumatized, very loving and a beautiful space. What happened was I realized that everything that destroyed me was really about my upbringing. I'll pause for a second and say I really understand what a veteran goes through because I was raised in a household that felt like a war zone. My father was a rageaholic, and I liken it to having a father that was the Incredible Hulk mixed with the movie The Shining, like scary and violent. And so the landmines were eruptions of rage. The weapons of destruction were a fist, a belt, and I even have witnessed underneath my mother's chin at young age. He had also betrayed us. He had a whole other family. He was a gambler, so we had no money. And my mother worked 5 jobs just to support us, and probably his gambling habit. He was never home. So we didn't have any guidance. We almost burned the house down because we were serving each other cereal for dinner. And my sister once tried to make us eggs and she burned the house down. So it's that kind of lack of foundation and lack of container that was really the problem, not necessarily being betrayed. So when you're raised like that, you don't have a sense of safety ever. You don't have a sense of self-worth ever. You feel guilty for everything you've done, right? Because you're getting belted for blinking or laughing. And you don't have at all any self-love. You are actually in a process of self-loathing. And so my first MDMA journey gave me my very first breath, actually, my very first sense of safety and sense of someone holding me. And you don't realize the freedom you have when your PTSD or your unhealed body, you just don't realize the freedom and the liberation that other people walking around have. And also just from that childhood, you make bad choices, like with the people you hang out with. And so I did have an experience with, I thought was a boyfriend, and I was way too young. I find a hand over my mouth and then I lose my virginity and I think that he's my boyfriend. But then you realize actually my body was just used as a vessel for his own desires. So there's a lot of shame in that too, right? This experience opened up the door to true healing because I did go to therapy and I did go to talk therapy, and it didn't get to the level of embodiment. And I have to say that too much information, I think, for maybe the men in this group, but I did have skin rashes. I did have women issues. I had no idea where those things would come from, but you know what? They came from stress. And we all know in the healing space that stress leads to inflammation, leads to other things in your body. I would get UTIs for no reason, all because of the stress I was holding in my body. And so on the psychedelic journey, which I ended up being open to doing deeper medicines, plant medicines like ayahuasca, psilocybin mushrooms, even iboga,
Wow.
even medicine called wachuma, which is a heart opener as well, to get to the very, very root of the issues. So now I have a balanced gut system, and now my body's all online and aligned. I have never felt healthier, more free, more emotional sovereignty in my entire life. I associate that with my psychedelic healing because it's not just emotional, it's neurological, and it's even gut biome. I feel like ayahuasca, the little gut biome in your belly is like, hi, happy, happy, happy. I get to be used, That's the story, and I hope that didn't trigger anybody, but the story of trauma to transcendence is a powerful one, and I do believe that a lot of our health issues come from some of the traumas that we haven't addressed, and we have a lot of them. Just our world is stressful.
Stress is sort of ubiquitous, if we will.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing all of that. I think gives a lot of context to this conversation. One of the things that I wanted to go a little bit down the wormhole with you on, you mentioned traditional therapy, and then you mentioned the fact that, okay, traditional therapy may not have given you all the benefits that psychedelic assisted therapy has given you. As a person who went through traditional therapy for years for different things, had later turned to psychedelics, I think there's something there to talk about, and especially around your experiences with traditional therapy and what you weren't getting out of it, why it kind of left you lingering for more.
Yeah, thank you. I actually got re-triggered through my traditional therapy. And I know that not everyone has the same traumas, and everybody's trauma, big T or little t, is valuable and worthy of healing. And so I just want to premise that. What strikes me with traditional talk therapy is that not all talk therapists are the same. Healing, to me, requires a grounded presence, a presence that doesn't feel top down. And also healing, to me, I know this to be true for at least me and the women that I serve, is that healing is also an embodied practice. So if we're talking a lot in talk therapy, it's all philosophical, and it's all a remembering and a trying to understand. I understand that my father was going through his own pain. That doesn't help me at all in my body. Not at all. I still have hypervigilance. I'm still tight. I am still hyperventilating if somebody says the wrong words. When women get sexually assaulted, oftentimes the words, you're going to be okay. There's like a lot of words that people use to gaslight women into situations sometimes. And so we don't always trust the words. And in my case, authority figures, I also grew up Catholic. So it's,
Yeah, I know that one.
Yikes, yeah. And so authority figures often are to be distrusted because I've been abused by authority. And I need not an intellect. I need a parent. I need someone who is going to be with me heart to heart and help me release the trauma from my body. Psychedelics is an embodied experience all the way around, except for ketamine. I have a different experience in healing from my ketamine assisted therapy that I had done. I prefer the other ones that are more embodied, less disassociated, because when a lot of women, at least the women that I serve, we disassociate from our bodies. We don't even know what our bodies are like. We don't know what it feels like. We don't believe it's ours. And so to come home into the body, to be present in the body and be alive in the body is what my goal is, at least. What the medicines do is it helps you be embodied at the same time as understanding what has gone on or what you've experienced, but also giving you that sense of transcendence. To me, psychedelic assisted therapy requires somebody who's going to allow that person who's healing to heal themselves, just like a cut on your arm. You need the great environment to heal. The antibiotic is not healing you, your body's healing you, right? The therapist is not healing you, you're healing yourself. So that's how I see the difference between the two.
For somebody listening to this, and there is still many camps when it comes to psychedelics, right? Because it can be very polarizing. Look, I grew up and had the DARE officers come to my school, explain to me that all of these things are evil, and nobody really mentioned David Nutt's study about how some of these substances are in fact safer than alcohol. How do you look to evaluate this as a person? Like, is this right for me? And perhaps, some people that it might not be right for.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what happens in medicine altogether is the person's sovereignty is disregarded. Our history is left unchecked. We have so much research on psychedelic healing from ancient times. And I also want to tell people to look where the money's going. So I'll just say that really quickly, but do your research, right? Do your own research. Psychedelic medicines have been around, I don't even know how many thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, there's some tale about cannabis being used. And I'm not saying cannabis is a psychedelic, but it exemplifies here being used in China sort of 5,000 years ago. Right?
There are artifacts of mushrooms. Even in the Christian religions, they have evidence on stained glass windows of mushrooms growing. I don't want to offend anyone's religiosity here, but if you're a Christian listening to this, and you go to the Nag Hammadi scriptures, which are the scriptures that were removed from the Bible and or all the lost gospels, they talk about Jesus Christ eating manna and perhaps going up top of the mountain and praying to Sophia, by the way. So you have to think that there's some evidence that mushrooms, at least, and in ancient times in Greeks, there was a fungus that produced a psychedelic effect that is similar to LSD right now.
This is the Kaikion, right?
The Kaikion, yeah.
Yeah, and then you have Soma in the Vedas.
Mhm.
There's numerous of these rites of passage, and I think they are more framed as rites of passage across various sacred traditions.
Yeah, and so I would say to do your research first, because even for therapy and say ADHD medicines, right, you have to be on them for a really long time. I have friends that have been to therapy for 25 years talking about the same thing. I understand that it's great to have conversations with people, but if you're doing something for 25 years and you have the same exact problem, I think you got to make a little change, right? And it does make sense a little bit if that's someone's livelihood, right? Does it make sense for a psychedelic to heal you? I will say there are things that might happen in my life that will cause something, but I am healed from my childhood wounds. I am healed from them. I do not have PTSD any longer, and it's complex PTSD. I choose to do psychedelic medicines now to tap into something greater, to be creative. You can go from healing trauma to accessing a part of you that is creative and more conscious. And so I had to heal first, and my healing journey was not easy. I'm going to preface that, but I feel really, really strong in my position that I'm healed from my childhood wounds, healed from, this is before medicine work, had a friend off the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm the only person that he called, and I'm the last person and the only person he called that day. And so that huge guilt and understanding of death really stayed with me for a long time. And even now, when I tap into plant medicine and to that piece of healing, I really have no fear of death. And I have a deeper understanding of life because of that. And that was, I will say, to me, is plant medicine experiences, really deep understanding of all of how life works. So I would say do your research and also kind of understand the propaganda of all the stories. This is your brain on drugs, right? Like people didn't want to go to war because they were connected, right? And so I think that that's important to do. I'm not going to try to convince anyone that it's good or bad, but just from a lived experience, being so afraid of authority, being so hypervigilant, having so many health issues, and now being absolutely healthy and absolutely sovereign in my own body. And I that's plant medicine.
You talked about earlier some, the rashes, the UTIs, those types of things that developed as a result of this stress, this trauma, and having then go through traditional therapy. It's not necessarily something that worked for you. And you tried these plant medicines and, all of a sudden a lot of these sort of health issues start to fall away. Along the ways, it sounds like you had a few good sitters, therapists, etc.
Uh-huh.
Are there commonalities in what you would say are sort of good experiences that you can share, and good air quotes, right?
Yeah.
Experiences and things people should be on the lookout for, because we'll get to
Mhm.
the topic of psychedelic justice here in a second.
Mhm. Mhm.
But right now, one of my biggest concerns is when people go sit something like ayahuasca with 300 other people, the person who's administering it probably does or hasn't been really taught. They're just administering it because maybe there's money. My favorite one is, I used to live in Amsterdam. It's sort of like pay what you want ayahuasca ceremony, right? What are some of the things that people can be on the lookout for to determine what is
Yeah.
right for me?
That's a great question. And it's a very important question. For those of us who are traumatized, sometimes the habit is to give up all your sovereignty and all your authority to a person. That's where it becomes very, very dangerous. And so the first thing would be to tap in and truly try to understand where you're at in that department. And then what you can do is you can ask a practitioner, like, what is their trauma and how did they get to solve it? Oftentimes what I have felt, this is just going to be with my son who had therapy, and I'm the only one who thinks this, by the way, in my family, but there was a time when we really got to the root of what was going on with him in therapy, and he's probably a great therapist. No names, but he got ripped open and to the most vulnerable place. And I don't know any trauma that she had. And she does have an Ivy League education. It was just like, I think she used the word, okay, it's time to zip this up and it'll happen next week. And I'm thinking, Mama Bear is like, you just ripped open my son and he's bleeding on the ground and we're going to stop. There's just no sense of healing because she's never gone through some of the things that we're trying to heal. So I look at what kind of experience does this person have? Not everyone that's a great space holder has to have trauma, but are they a great space holder? Are they grounded and are they present? Is this about them or is this about healing? A lot of people have egos. I keep saying go for the money. If the language around the person is, oh my God, he or she is a great healer. Oh my God, he or she is the most amazing shaman. I would consider that a little bit odd because most of the people who are here for healing is, I'm doing nothing but making sure that you don't hit your head, that you can cry, that you have help going to the bathroom, that your physical needs are met. I'm here to serve you. You are the healer. You are the medicine. That's one thing. And then I also check on lineage. So there's a lot of people out there who are did an ayahuasca journey and they think that they need to be a shaman because they're so grateful and because it works, right? But then there is so much to indigenous wisdom that people from the global north and the west just don't have, especially in America. We just don't have a lineage of healing. We have a lineage of colonization. We have a lineage of oppression. How does one sit for somebody who's been oppressed if they have a lineage of oppressing? So I always check lineage. I always check their ability to hold space, and I check the ego. I think it's really, really important to check why they are doing this. And you can ask those questions. For those of you, it's ask lineage, ask them why. Ask
And if
what their
and
trauma
if they
is.
don't answer, then go find somebody else, right?
If they don't answer, go find someone else. There are plenty of people who are doing this work, especially Indigenous wisdom keepers. So, for example, you have a Western person this is what they do for a living. They bring the medicine from Peru or Brazil, and they're charging like $2,500, $3,000 for a sitting. And then that person who lives in the jungle, maybe they gave it to them for free. I don't know how much they charge for that medicine. And there's no lineage. There's no teaching of, how it affects their land, how it affects their families. Just like everything, I feel like the global north does. It's like we're ruining the rainforest. People, this is our livelihood. This is what we eat. There's a lot of conservation needs now for all of the medicines because people are pirating them and bringing them out and selling them, not just for healing, but also all these medicines can be used in different ways. And a lot of them appropriated, extracted, colonized.
Peyote is one that comes to mind immediately,
Mm-hmm.
right? Fortunately, you
Yeah.
just touched on something that I think is an interesting segue. When we look at evaluating a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
and first, thank you for this checklist is really, really helpful for people. When we're looking at the world of psychedelics, particularly in the past 5, maybe a little bit longer, but 5-ish years, when we started seeing companies that were IPOing, using intellectual property law to protect questionably original formulations of things, brings about this idea of capitalism to psychedelics, right? I'm not saying capitalism is bad. I think anybody could just look at my background and say that's probably not the case. You mentioned the sort of $3,000 ceremonies, the $5,000, the $10,000. There's more. There's people that are charging much more than that, right? How do we level the playing field? Because like trauma is not something that is a rich person's game. It's universal, right?
There are some nonprofits. I have a nonprofit. My nonprofit, it's called Wonderland Project. And I saw the need that this is expensive. This is an expensive journey, right? I connect women survivors of domestic violence and sexual exploitation to trauma-informed plant medicine care and integration. There is a huge need for access. And what I'm seeing in the field is a lot of people talking about commercialism. There's a lot of money going towards recreating a fake version of the plant medicine, a drug instead of the plant medicine. And there's a lot of language around, it's safer. And it might be in some circumstances like iboga, it really does something with your heart. And so there are ways that scientists are trying to create a molecule that doesn't do that for your heart. And that's a great medicine for addiction. If you take away the spirit of the plant, though, like out of ceremony, I feel like healing in ancient times, right? It was part of the culture. All these medicines were part of the culture.
The shaman was a core part of many of the ancient cultures, right?
Yeah. Back to my nonprofits, we connect women, and I also do a lot of sacred reciprocity for the Indigenous because I feel like there's so much wisdom that we have not even tapped into. And these people didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. Like, they live off the land and learning off the land. I don't think that a person with a great deal of trauma like mine, I did it underground for a long time. And then I went to the jungle and I sat with people. The infrastructure of an Indigenous community, this is part of their life.
You hear of certain facilities in Costa Rica, right? And this is very different from going to a retreat in Costa Rica, I'm guessing.
So going down to the Amazon, number one, it's really hard to get to. It's really hard to get to. And I just went last August, and what broke my heart was you could see smoke everywhere. Farmers are trying to take the land away. And so I went to visit the Huniquin tribe, which I think it means first people. It's a beautiful village called Punia. That means hummingbird. And there's a road that is like taking over their space. And so you can see smoke and you can hear things sometimes. And it's disappointing that they are not even looked at as legitimate Brazilians, right? Although they are indigenous to the land. When you go down there, it's different for a Westerner or a global North person, or even somebody who lives in Brazil proper, because the infrastructure, at least in America, healing is so removed. It's like we have to have an authority figure to heal. Their healing, an ayahuasca experience, is part of their culture. And so when they're doing a journey, it's also quite ceremonial, right? Because they don't have the same traumas that we have. And so you'll have a father coming up with their daughter, and they'll put medicine on their forehead, depending on the age, give them a taste. So they already know built-in community, built-in preparation, built-in integration, and they're And it's a celebratory, it's a connection to the divine, it's connection to the plant, it's connection to the earth, connection with each other. Very, very different from a retreat center, sometimes owned by a Westerner, not even a Costa Rican, or, you're really paying for like the hotel and the food. And then I don't know how much money they're giving to the facilitators or to the shamans if they bring them in. It's like a blip in time versus this is how you live. Quite magnificent to see how intelligent they are about what the land offers.
And they have generations and generations of wisdom that's been passed down as a result of that.
Yeah, and ritual, we don't think that it's important. We use it at funerals, we use it at weddings, we use it at when kids have birthday parties. There's some importance to it. We've just kind of dumbed it down a little bit. Everything's ritual there. It's really glorious and beautiful. And so it feels important. It feels like when you're connecting with that divine essence, it feels important when you have the ritual. I feel like it's very important to honor both. Like we have to live in this world. I think that it's hard for somebody to go down to the jungle. The integration is built in. We're so used to having a bed and no tarantulas, so I do think that there's a different structure for Westerners before they go to, I think it's advanced learning when you go down to the jungle. We have to be aware of the cultural appropriation, the extraction, the misuse of these medicines because people are taking down forests for building. We need trees, y'all, to breathe. So, things like that where people aren't thinking about holistically how to approach the medicines.
We treaded into that topic of Indigenous reciprocity, right? And one of the things that I know you've been heavily involved with is that topic. We chatted a little bit about the fact that sometimes, yes, people need to be rewarded. And we're kind of treading these two spaces of, these traditional wisdom, ancient wisdom, and then modern capitalism. And it's a very fine line, right? It's certainly not easy to tread. And when we talk about the Indigenous reciprocity element, what are some tools that, if somebody's going to go down this route, right? And let's say they're going to embrace the idea of psychedelic assisted therapy because they're working on past traumas or some sort of thing. What are some things that you recommend people keep into their awareness when selecting? Because it all plays into itself, right? Like you select your sitter, you select the person that you're working with. How does that feed back into that Indigenous reciprocity element? Because, as you highlighted earlier, like peyote, 5-MeO, DMT, like these all come from ayahuasca. All of the substances we're talking about here all come from nature. How do we protect that element of that? Is there a way to protect it from the running bull that is capitalism?
Yeah. Well, I think that now that you have the knowledge that there's a lot of extraction going on and there's a lot of money to be had, it's really being conscious of where the medicine comes from and trying to be conscious of how you want to participate in the medicine. Some people will say, I just need to get rid of this addiction. And I understand that. Oftentimes with plant medicine, you will have this sense of belonging to something greater than yourself. I think that if you go into something saying you want to be part of this fabric, part of the community, if you want to be part of it, then you're already open to how do we do this in a beautiful way. And the beautiful way would be to understand that there is a history and that there is a lineage and that there is wisdom that the Indigenous has. All of our if we go back, and the First Nations in the United States have really great knowledge of how to tend to the land and tend to the animals, right? That's the same with all the medicines that we are talking about. UFO is the 5-MeO DMT. We have to use synthetics now because the frogs are one, getting extinct, but people who were trying to extract that medicine weren't doing it properly, right? They're killing the toads versus doing it the way the Indigenous would have done it. If you care about the ecosystem of your body, the ecosystem of existence with others, and the ecosystem of like the planet itself, it would be just super wise to go, okay, peyote, let me look at the lineage of that. And how can I do this best where I'm actually working with the original lineage. Like, I won't sit with American person for ayahuasca. I will not do that. It's just one of my principles, because there's family history, there's connection that even myself here, being born in the United States, I don't have that lineage. I mean, I feel like I'm a professional in transcending trauma, but I don't have the lineage, the deep, deep lineage for ayahuasca. Can I help and get rid of wash buckets? For sure. I can hold space. But to be served that medicine, I want to be served from somebody who has deep lineage and has been studying this for years. It's just like, I don't want you to give me surgery. I don't want you to cut me open. I want somebody who's studied deep, deep, deep knowledge, who doesn't have an ego, who has all the tools and who's seen it all to bring forth my medicine. I just made a rule for myself, which was I sit with Indigenous people because they do come and visit. When Wonderland Project, psilocybin is legal in Jamaica. We go to the Rastafari village. I do it purely because it's legal there, 100% legal. The lineage is 500 years of slavery. So the Rastafari have decided that their roots were going to be from Ethiopia. And so they infused their own indigenous experience on the island of Jamaica, and they live off the land just like Indigenous folks do. And what I decided was we will take women there for at least a psilocybin experience because they live off the land. When I offer them money to hold space for us, it's going to the Jamaicans that are living off the land. It's not going to a different country who owns the hotel, and then I'm not hiring people from all over to come in. It's like it's going to the people it should be going to, and they tend to the land, they steward the land, they grow the mushrooms. I feel complete there. And also just the history of their liberation. They know oppression, right? Because even in Jamaica, not all Rastafari are seen as equal. So if we're going to liberate the body, who best to be with than people who really, truly understand liberation and one love. So that's what you can do with other medicines.
Well, beautifully said. And let's get into Wonderland Project, but also you've hinted at it a couple of times here, and just sort of your specific focus on feminine trauma, right? Because and this was in my research, so you'll have to correct me if I was wrong here, but you mentioned ancestral trauma experienced by women. Ancestral, I think of like generational trauma. Why did you kind of go that route and sort of focusing on helping this population? Because I mean, look, we can talk about women's health in general and how it's very underserved by science, but let's talk about how you went down this path.
Yeah. So besides my own experience, right, I could just say, oh, it's because of my own experience. But I really do believe that on a global scale, women are underrepresented and our healing is not addressed. And 1 out of 3 women will have experienced domestic violence or sexual exploitation. We're half the population. We're also the population that creates life. We are also the population through our own bodies that sustains life. And when we stop revering the feminine, and I mean also the earth, how you treat the earth is how you treat the feminine. And you can see how today, like the and pillaging of the earth is what we're trying to do to women. And so it is my strong belief that if we start healing women first, women are our bonding mechanism. Just when we have babies, whenever a child, when my kids were young, whenever there was another kid, they were my kid for that moment because I'm a mother. I'm going to include everyone. And so the more we can focus on women, I believe that healed women will heal the world because we're not going to exclude anyone. I'm not excluding anyone from their healing journey. I want everyone to heal, including men. But there are a lot of men right now in the psychedelic field. There's way more men than there are women, especially trying to make money. You know, the focus is on veterans right now. And there's men and women in the veteran circle, but I don't know what the population, 1/3 of the population. I don't know exactly what the population of veterans, but it's not half the population, right? We're focusing on veterans, but we're not focusing on women. Women have a unique, because we create life, gestate and create and birth life, there's a portion of our time here on earth where we're extraordinarily vulnerable in that period of gestation and birthing. And our bodies have been appropriated and abused and oppressed in all facets. If I focused on women, had more women leadership, this whole idea of like including everyone in the healing journey would take shape and we can create more and we can love more and we can be in community more. And so I'm focusing on women because I believe that that is going to be the way that we change the world. The Dalai Lama once said, the world will be saved by the Western woman. And I actually think he meant women. The women in the world are going to help save the world.
You're not only bringing these women who have experience with domestic violence, etc., to Jamaica, you're also doing some research, as I understand it, around this.
Yeah, trying to.
So historically, as I understand it, science has largely avoided studying women because menstrual cycles, basically, as I understand it. Would love to understand a little bit more what types of research you hope to get with the Wonderland Project in the future.
Yeah, thank you. The women's cycles and women's rhythms are totally misunderstood. Number one, people don't even know what menopause is, and like the population grows into menopausal women. Getting your period is like a dramatic thing for people to understand. And we're constantly in flow and in change, right? And so that's the same thing for healing. I really truly believe that if we had sovereignty in our own bodies and we had healing in our own bodies, we would shift the health system quite dramatically. And at least for women, I hope to study what women need for healing. Like, it's not the same as men. It's just not the same. Especially because of our trauma, the wounds of the sacred feminine, more women get raped than men.
Mm-hmm.
More women aren't, allowed in the boardroom than men. In other countries, women aren't allowed to expose themselves, things like that. Women get beaten women aren't educated in some places. And so when we learn about how we heal, do we need to have a group? Do we need to have it all women? Do we need to have what kind of medicines work better for the moon cycles? Like, we need all that information to not just heal the psychological wounds, but actually to be fully embodied so we help co-create what is great for our earth. Even agriculture, there's this book called When God Was a Woman, and it talks about the Sumerian times when women were the agriculturalists and whole culture got annihilated. It's like, how can we do this life better with the perspective of a healed woman? There's so much study we need to have, which would include, of course, the cycles of women and plant medicine, the types of plant medicines that work for different types of traumas, and also, I think, creation. Like, actually, how can we use these medicines in a ceremonial way? To me, it's ceremonial to co-create something greater and bigger and better than what we're doing, which is not including everybody in the system.
If you think about the world in the next 5 years and the space that you're in, what excites you the most?
What I would love to see is the decolonization of plant medicine. I don't think plants should be legal or illegal. I would also love to see a bottom-up approach to healing, adding the perspective of the people who've been traumatized, and women in particular. You have all these intellectuals. Sometimes they aren't even doing the medicine, right? And they've done it once and they're like, let me study this. And actually having it a co-creative experience where women who've been traumatized and they've healed, well, actually, this situation doesn't work for me, and I'll tell you why. And that being part of the conversation. So I say survivor leaders being given a seat at the banquet table of this renaissance, the legalization of plants, but also the education for everyone, not just a licensed therapist, education for everyone on how these medicines work and how these medicines are available, how they can be available. And the indigenous narrative should be revered. I would love that to be the focus. But also, some people are going to want to do the clinical route. There's not enough earth-based stories, I guess. Some people will be too afraid because the narrative has been scary before. And so for those people who would just want to go the medical route, I hope that the medical route also includes wisdom from the indigenous, because there's something missing to me. Like, you just get a shot and the one and done shot. So many people in your field want the pill and they don't want to do any other work. And we know that it's the work that is important. It's the work, it's the integration that is really, really important in order to actually really transcend. And so I guess I would say even integration as being as important or maybe even more important than just going on an ayahuasca journey. Throughout our whole conversation, I've been saying the same thing. Having your healing journey be sacred, including going to the medical doctor to get a shot. Perhaps we should be very sacred about all these things, and things enter our bodies. We work with them together. I would even just do, just in your field, optimal health, kind of just understanding why our bodies do what they do and why we want to be as healthy as we can, because this is a disruptor in the medical field also, your field, right? And not just psychedelics as a disruptor, but your field is a disruptor because not all medical doctors understand the whole system. And I guess what we're saying is, I would love in the next 5 years to have the whole system be available for everyone and it not be so money-based and it be really heart-centered and soul-centered. So that's a goal for me.
I love that. And Life is Ceremony might be the title for this episode. I love how you tied it all into bringing everything to a sense of awareness. And I think so much of right now, and I know my own life, right? Like there's times where we go through periods of awareness and presence, and there's times where we don't.
Yeah.
But a lot of what these medicines have helped me do is become a lot more present to what's going on.
Yeah.
Including this amazing conversation today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So I guess what I would say for anyone curious or to get people curious is the question of, do you feel free in your body? Do you feel comfortable in your body? When stressors or news or things that are triggering, can you come to a place of homeostasis? Like, does that feel like a desire of yours? Do you feel pleasure every day? Like, can you find that sense of awe and wonder? These are things that, to me, plant medicines offer us in terms of breaking through all the noise of what today is. The news is traumatizing. And if we can find those places of awe, wonder, peace, wholeness, presence, being, before we do anything, maybe there's some hope for our future.
One last question that we always ask everybody. If you're going to give everybody listening one piece of advice to live smarter, not harder, what would it be? This is really, really, really simple, but not easy. To live smarter is to be madly in love with yourself, to know yourself so deeply that you know your true north, you walk your true north, you speak your true north, and that never gets you in trouble. Beautiful. Coltrane, where can people find out more about you, what you're doing, the Wonderland Project, etc.? I'm not the best marketer, but you can find me on Instagram. It's Lord Coltrane, or wonderlandproject.love. And then wonderlandproject.love is also the website. And Lord Coltrane is also the website. So very simple. Coltrane Lord, thank you so much. This has been a phenomenal conversation and the first of many, I hope. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for having me. And I'm super grateful to everyone for your presence. To everybody listening, have a wonderful day.